And boy, he thought he'd died and gone to heaven when he hooked up with this woman with these little cute little stair-step girls. And then he had their friends come over for sleepovers, and he was just right down there having a sleepover with all these little girls. And then he started taking pictures of them. And he would have the kids sit on his lap, and he'd put makeup on himself so that the kids were literally sitting there, and then he had this camera rigged up where you could see his genitals, and it was a crazy case. And somehow or other, one of these videotapes ended up in a dumpster at a parking lot in a shopping center. And that's how we ended up breaking the case open. But families in the community said, oh my gosh, that's Mr. So-and-so. That's the back of my kid sitting on his lap putting makeup on him. And then he'd go wash his face, and then the next kid would come and put all the eye makeup on him. But I mean, he was a manipulator. Yep. But he loved little girls. And these guys are really good with their cognitive distortions. It was the kid's fault. She wanted to have sex with me. If she didn't like it, she could have told me to stop. I can't control myself. But it was that darn wife of mine. If she'd have had more sex with me, then I wouldn't have had to sexually abuse the kids. That was that. So we blame it on the wife. Again, it wasn't their fault because, oh, poor me, I'm sick, I'm stressed, I'm having money problems, I'm having work problems. And of course, they wouldn't hurt them. But it is my responsibility to educate my kids about sex. I had one gentleman who took his son down to Washington, D.C., 14th Street, paid his money, and had a hooker teach his son about sex. And he said, well, I couldn't have done that with my daughter. I said, well, why would you do it with your son to start with, for goodness sakes? And so because you couldn't have a prostitute with your daughter, then you took it upon yourself to do it in a way that was actually having sex with your daughter, right? I mean, so, he told the judge that, and the judge didn't buy it. But, I mean, they convinced themselves of all these things. And, she's just overreacting. We have another case that CASA is involved in where Dad was educating, and he used the internet to educate her. But then he also felt it was a need to educate his daughter for when she goes to college, if she ever got attacked, what she should do. Now, she was like in 9th grade. So it'd be a few years before she went to college. But in the midst of trying to teach her like self-defense, he then made it sexual. So he would be fondling her and he'd say, well, let's say they ripped your clothes off. Then what would you do? And let's say they grabbed you here and here. And finally the kid went to school and said, this is bizarre, And then he didn't do it just once. He did it over and over and over. And finally this kid said, I think my dad's sexually abusing me. Duh, you think? Yeah. And these kids, they just need to forget about it. Let's just move on. This is no big deal. She's making a big thing of it, And of course, the big deal of, please forgive me. So as a CASA, I know you all have wonderful, warm hearts, but be prepared. Sex offenders find religion very quickly, usually within 48 hours of being locked up in the jail. And they will call mom and say, oh, please forgive me, you don't understand. Now I'm saved. I understand the error of my ways. I'll never do it again. Please get all the money out of the bank account and go hire an attorney and get me out of here. But how am I going to pay the rent? Oh, please, you got to get some help. You got to help me because, she blew it out of proportion. So it's not a big deal to start with. But, and then those big bad police and social workers, they made me confess to it. But now that I've found religion, it won't happen again. Please, please, please take me back. And then let's get rid of the kid, because she is a problem. All right. But we tell kids they don't have to forgive. At some point, after they've had therapy and a time to think about it, and but they don't have to get that crying phone call from the guy in jail who begs for forgiveness. You don't have to forgive him. Going to continue on talking a little bit more about what happens when we as a system intervene in these cases. And as I said, it creates a crisis for families. But in order to make sure that everybody is safe, we intervene in a way that hopefully will give attention to all the players, because sexual abuse affects every person in the family, not just the victim, not just the offender, but obviously mom, siblings, extended family. It touches everyone, and all in a different way. So we have to be aware of what their needs are and what kind of things we need to do to offer them services and to protect them. And the way we deal with it, as many jurisdictions around Virginia do, is really a multidisciplinary approach. And in doing so, what we have found, not only do we work closely with law enforcement in doing the investigations, we have to make sure that we're looking at risk to children, and that our team includes as many people as we need, such as treatment providers who work their specialty with victims, with non-offending parents, and with offenders. Probation officers, polygraph examiners. It is a whole, really a community containment model that we use in Virginia. And what we have found is that it takes folks like CASAs to be a part of that team. Treatment for offenders, primarily in Virginia, is a relapse prevention program. And what that tells us is that we have to hold them accountable so that they understand what happened in their particular situation, why sexual abuse took place, what is the cycle of abuse, so that they know where they are in that cycle so they can have controls and stop that offense. It is their problem. They must be accountable, and for those of us in the helping profession, holding them accountable means a good, thorough investigation, and if need be, a criminal prosecution, if in fact the elements of a crime are there and we have a solid enough case to move forward. And again, I encourage you, get to know the social workers in CPS, the police and sheriff's detectives who are prosecuting these cases, because even if the standard of evidence is different in a civil and a criminal case, the body of evidence is the same. And so if you have a civil case where we filed an abuse neglect petition that pulls you in as a CASA, and that child is also going through the criminal court process, I would assume you would want to be there. You would want to be with that child or know what's happening, you know, throughout both of those court processes. All righty? But it is really important that we keep very close working relationship with all of those folks. One of the first things we do when treating a sex offender is have them have a psychosexual risk assessment. In Virginia, in order to do this type of a sex offender evaluation, you must have the certification, excuse me, I'll put it up here, of CSOTP. And that means CSOTP, Certified Sex Offender Treatment Provider. You have to have these credentials in order to do a psychosexual risk assessment. And when they do these, they use a variety of tools. They also look at any information that they can get their hands on. So if an offender is charged and his defense attorney says, I'm going to get an evaluation, and I'm going to bring my expert in to tell you that he's a great guy, he's not a child molester, he wouldn't do this, and the jury should find him not guilty. The first question is, well, who are you using? Are you using a CSOTP, or are you using some psychologist out of the phone book who doesn't know beans about sex offenders? And in fact, what tools are they using? And what information do they have access to? They should know everything about the CPS investigation. They should know everything about the police investigation. They shouldn't just say, well, Joe Schmo, go to this therapist, get your evaluation, but you know what, you don't need to know what the police know. You don't need to get the actual victim statement. You don't need to get interviews that were done by CPS. In fact, you don't even need to know the initial disclosure when the kid told the teacher or whomever they told. You don't need that. You just check out this guy and find out. Well, guess what? The guy's going to go in and say, nope, this kid's a liar, didn't do it, no way, no how. Run him through a bunch of interviews and that's it. Nope, he's good, he's not a risk to anybody. In fact, my expert opinion, he's a upstanding, virtuous member of society and shouldn't be held accountable for anything because he didn't do it. On the other side, if it's a CSOTP that has the knowledge and skills to do these, they're going to read police reports and CPS interviews. They may even watch the videoed interviews that we do of kids. They're going to want to know every single thing about this guy, his work history, his health history, everything, his employment history. Because it's real important to get a thorough evaluation. We also want to know, are there any other risks for this person? Alcohol and drug evaluations, where is he in being a risk to society? Another piece of a psychosexual risk assessment is a polygraph. There are a variety of different types of treatment polygraphs that are used by certified sex offender treatment providers. The first one is a sexual history polygraph. So as a CASA, you may in fact be reading the CPS files and find out that this person has an evaluation being conducted and they're getting ready to take a sexual history polygraph. Well, what in the world does that mean? That means that as a part of their treatment, which the preferred method of treatment for offenders is group therapy, they have to share and disclose everything about their sexual history, from their first sexual experience to their last sexual experience, everything in between. It could have been when they began masturbating, the first sexual experiences with girls, teenagers. It could involve things that might be embarrassing to people. Were you ever involved with any animals? Were you ever involved in pornography? Phone sex, you name it, there are things that people have done. But what the purpose is, you share and disclose it during group in your therapy, and then when it comes time to take your sexual history polygraph, we hope you will pass that polygraph because you've shared it all. Well, we had one gentleman who had a CASA, who has a CASA. The kids are still in foster care. His sexual history was 23 pages long, and he said he really hadn't finished it. He still had a few more. But you name it, he had done it. The first time he took his sexual history polygraph, he failed it. He said, I guess now that I'm learning about it, the kinds of things that I didn't think were any big deal really were things I did that made them victims. When I'm in the swimming pool with my teenage nieces and nephews and we're just roughhousing, I was doing it because I was sexually gratified by, what do you play when you play in the water? Marco Polo? He said, I was playing that because I wanted to grab them. I wanted to fondle them. And what better place to do it in a swimming pool? He said, but in reality, they were victims too. So after a few more months, he took his polygraph, he passed it. It's not a polygraph to say, did you sexually abuse this kid? And if you did, I'm calling the police and we're going to lock you up. It is, we want to know everything about you. What makes you tick? What were your interests? What is your level of risk? What are the things that you do to either hide your sexual activity, or what do you do, like the alcohol and drug use, to convince yourself that it's okay? So the whole risk assessment deals with every part of their life. Another kind of polygraph is a maintenance polygraph that they take during treatment. So as you're working a sex case, you may be hearing from social workers that, okay, he's passed his sexual history, now he's going to be taking maintenance polygraphs. And those are done every 6 months or so. What is a maintenance polygraph? Let's say you figure out that this guy really likes little kids. And one of his triggers is that when he goes out, he likes to go by daycare centers and playgrounds and swimming pools. Well, you ask him, are you doing those things? Oh, no, I know that I can't do that. Well, guess what? We take a polygraph. Are you going by playgrounds, swimming pools? Oh, no, I don't do that, but there is that karate studio right next to my bank, and gosh, I got to go to the bank like every 3 days, and I go around 4 o'clock when all those kids are out there going in and out of the karate studio, and then I go sit in my car and masturbate afterwards. Sounds pretty disgusting, but that's what these guys do. All right? So making sure that we're on top of them every minute of their life, basically. We need to know what they're doing. Because if they're not having sex with the kids in their house, are they at risk of having sex with kids elsewhere? How much of a danger are they? So if, in fact, you're working a sex case, be prepared to get an even broader education than the brief information I'm providing you tonight. But ask the treatment providers. Sit in on staffings and meetings to say, where are we in this? What are things that I as a CASA should be looking for? When I'm out meeting with this guy and talking to him. And, how can I reinforce the kinds of things that he's doing in treatment? And if they're in treatment with a good treatment provider, they're going to be able to talk to you about what they're doing. Relapse prevention. This is really the whole crux of sex offender treatment. They participate in weekly group therapy sessions where they address personal issues and are able to receive feedback from group members, which allows them to be held accountable. I can say, you know what, that's a bunch of crap that you rolled over and you thought it was your wife, right? We all know that. But if an offender says it to another offender, Joe, I've been in your shoes. You're just making up a story. That's a bunch of crap, because I used to use a bunch of crap just like that too. I know it, you know it, let's cut through it. You purposely put your daughter in the middle between you and your wife because you wanted access to your daughter, right? Okay. Or you purposely sent your wife and son to church so that you would have access to your daughter, right? Well, but she wanted it. No, she didn't. She's 10 years old. She didn't want it, But these guys get in each other's face. They hold themselves accountable. And for those that have gone through the court system and are court ordered to be in treatment, they cannot miss. Short of death, they can't miss. You miss a group, your probation officer gets involved, the CSOTP is calling probation, you could go back to jail, or if they've never been in jail, you could be put in jail, particularly if they have a suspended sentence. So we know that it's serious stuff. Offenders have to pay for their own treatment. And yeah, poor me, I can't pay the rent. You tell me I can't live at home and I've got to pay, for my own living expenses, and now I'm supporting, 2 households, and then I have to pay. I'll tell you what, you don't pay, we call probation, and you're going to jail. You figure it out. I've seen gentlemen take up a collection from their buddies. Can I borrow $5 from you, $5 from you, $5 from you? Because they know they got to pay when they walk in that door of group every week. And if they don't go, consequence is potentially back in jail. All right? But it is an excellent way to get offenders and keep them accountable. Let's say a guy gets sentenced to 10 years in prison. Is he going to get some sex offender treatment? Or, how can we coordinate what he's done in prison with what happens when he comes out of prison? So that what we hope, as far as convictions, is that in fact, if the judge and juries find people guilty, they give them some kind of sentence of incarceration. And that's up to them, depending on the charges, the type of offenses. It could be a couple of months, it could be many, many years. And that depends on, many factors, judges, juries, attorneys, evidence, all of that. But what we would also prefer is a very lengthy probation after whatever incarceration they get. Probation means active supervision by a probation officer. Most probation officers also have a surveillance officer on top of their regular probation officer that checks them out. Where do you go? What do you do at nighttime? If you know you have to stay away from little kids, where are you hanging out? Are you going to the mall? Are you going to the ball field? Where are you going? Looking for kids. Then they also have their CSOTP treatment provider. They may have a social worker from Child Protective Services as well. So a lot of people are monitoring them while they're on probation. And that's a much better model than just saying, okay, 10 years, serves his time, and he gets out and he's not on probation at all. The other thing, of course, in Virginia has the sex offender registry. Have any of you ever looked on the state police website to see how many of your neighbors are sex offenders? They're there. Just look up your address, your zip code. You got sex offenders probably, 3 doors down, you just don't know it. I'm not concerned about them. I'm concerned about the ones we haven't caught yet. They might be living next door. But we have lots of sex offenders who are on the registry, and they are also accountable to report in with probation. Within our county, we have a special group of police officers, part of the Criminal Investigation Bureau, and they work in addition to probation to make sure that these guys are living where they tell the state police they're living. Because these guys tend to bounce around a lot, and you're supposed to give a change of address every time you move. Well, sometimes they forget. And so they now might be living with a woman and a couple of children, and oops, they just forgot to call the state police and tell them that they've moved. They weren't living alone anymore, they're living somewhere else. So there's a lot to the whole community containment model. But there are a number of things that offenders have to do as part of their treatment. And this is quite of a lengthy list, but number one, they got to take responsibility. And it's not, oh, poor me, I was drunk and, blah, 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 feel sorry for me. And they understand what they did and that it was wrong. They understand what it means for a person to consent to having sex with them. And 5-year-old little girls who wear cute little dresses and run around and sit on daddy's lap is not given consent. And 17-year-old girls don't give consent either. We have to look very carefully at their relationship. What coercion was used? What is the relationship? Years ago, we had a code change in which the indecent liberty statute was expanded to be custodial indecent liberties, which is a felony in Virginia. And it applies to people who are in a custodial relationship. That applies to not just the parent, but the step-parent, the grandparent. We had a teacher. We have had several clergy-type youth ministers. They were in a custodial type of relationship with these kids and convinced them that it was okay to have sex. And so we expanded the code section so that we could determine that, if you're a teacher, you know better that you shouldn't have sex with your students. No matter how cute this little 17-year-old is, you're supposed to walk away. Don't have sex with them. So we've had some good code changes as a result of cases. They have to identify these cognitive distortions, their manipulation of people. Telling the wife, if it's all your fault because if you would have had sex with me, then I wouldn't have had sex with my daughter. Okay. And then going through anger management, communication, all of the things. Victim empathy, develop some support systems, develop a relapse prevention plan. Who are their supports? You know, can they call up a friend and say, you know what, I need to talk? Is their only person they can talk to their probation officer and their therapist? We hope not. We hope they can expand. So they've got to get some support systems because they can very easily fall back into some of their offending behaviors. We also have to do some things for moms. We have to provide them with a variety of treatments, both individual, in fact, if they have been victims themselves. We also have to try to build a relationship between that mother and the victim. Remember, this is the mom that said, I don't believe it because she didn't tell me? And they do. Why didn't I tell you you could always come to me? No matter what, always come to me. And we start out, Mom, she can't. She couldn't tell you, and these are all the reasons. In your particular family, she couldn't tell you. She knew you'd be upset. She knew you'd be mad. And you know what? How many kids would tell after the first time? And then when it happens, 50 times, Mom's going to be even more angry. Why didn't you tell me the first time? Now you're telling me it's happened 50 times? So she's really, really upset with the kid. Building a relationship, what does that mean? Particularly if there's been that role reversal or the dad has given those special favors and done things, and mom might have even pushed the child onto the dad. He's your new stepfather, I want you to like him, spend time with him, and now here you're making up lies about him? How could you do this to me as your mother? Well, guess what, Mom? She didn't tell you because she knew that would be your reaction, that you would in fact question her. So we want to have some work done with mom and kid. So mom can say, you know what, I'm really sorry this happened. I wish you had come to me. I wish you could have told me, but I understand why you didn't. And I'm here to protect you and support you and keep you safe. And I'm really sorry that he abused you. And I'm sorry I didn't know it. Or I'm sorry that when you tried to tell me, I didn't hear you. Because kids say, I did tell my mom. I told my mom I don't like that babysitter. Or I told my mom, you know what, when I go and stay at Grandma and Grandpa's for that week every summer, and Grandpa kisses me, and I told you, like, he's yucky and he smells like cigars, and what I meant to say is he tastes like cigars when he sticks his tongue down my throat and all I smell and taste is his cigars. But she couldn't say that. What she'd say is, Grandpa's yucky and he smells and he's gnarly and he's grouchy and I don't want to go to Grandma and Grandpa's anymore. But what she couldn't say is, Grandpa's sexually abusing me. Grandpa's touching me in places I don't like, or Grandpa's making me do stuff that I don't want to do. So many times kids think they're telling, but they're not telling in a way that gets mom's attention. And in hindsight, the mom says, oh, is that what you tried to tell me? Is that what it was? And here I'm saying, maybe it was a babysitter. And he's a great babysitter. He doesn't pull any punches. He puts you in bed on time. He doesn't let you have 10 snacks and all the things that kids try to pull with a babysitter. But in fact, what the kid was trying to say is, Mom, I don't like the babysitter because he touches me. Or he makes me keep secrets about, things that I don't like to do. So again, we have to really help that mom and child have some better communication. Then we need to pull in the siblings. I'm angry at my sister because she told. And she told, and now I don't have a dad. What's up with that? All right. SAFE is a program that we have in Fairfax, and many other jurisdictions in Virginia have some kind of program. SAFE is Sexual Abuse Family Education. It is group therapy. It's a psychoeducational group for the non-offending parents. It's to help moms understand what are sex offenders, what goes on with them, what was happening in my particular family that I had blinders on, that I didn't see and hear and know what was going on.